the Freeform gradient tool in Adobe Illustrator. So Illustrator has a gradient tool, and within that tool we have several types of gradients that we can do. Now if I go over and open up my gradient panel, I'm going to pull it off of the dock here so that we can have it visible the entire time that we are working. So we have our linear gradient, we have a radial gradient. The difference between those two, linear gradient, again goes left to right, top to bottom, or at an angle. The radial gradient will do a radiation out of a center point. So it's a series of concentric circles with the starting color in the center. Now the newest option in our gradient panel is the Freeform gradient. The Freeform gradient works from an ordered or random sequence, and there are two options as you can see when I click on this. I can draw gradients with points, color points, or I can work with lines. Let's practice with the Freeform gradient tool. So a couple of notes before we begin. The Freeform gradient tool provides a new color blending capability that allows us to create more rich and maybe more photorealistic gradients. So the goal is to make it look a little bit more natural than what we can achieve with our linear gradient or the radial gradient. So we can create color stops in any part of our object. What I have here, if I select the fish, you can see that it's all one object. So we're going to go ahead and work with our Freeform gradient. A couple of other notes regarding this Freeform gradient. We can only apply this to the fill of an object, so we are not allowed to do it on a stroke. And we can move these color stops, and we can change those color stops to apply our gradient. So like I mentioned, there are two modes. We're going to start with the point mode, and then there also is a line mode. Difference between the two: points deal with color stops as independent points, and the lines creates color stops over a line segment in the object. So to apply, when I clicked on the Freeform with the points, this default came up, but I can easily click to apply color stops. So just by clicking anywhere in the object, I'm applying a color stop. To change the location or the position of the color stop, I simply can drag. You can see how it's altering the look of my color in the gradient. To delete, couple different methods. I can click on the colors and I can drag it completely outside of the area. Disappears. I also can have that color stop selected, and over in the panel I can click the trash icon, which would delete this specific stop. Or the last method is by selecting that color stop and pressing delete on my keyboard. So any of those three methods would delete the color stop. Now the spread around my color stop is adjustable as well, and you can find that in the gradient panel. So I can change the spread to however I want. You can see that increased it by increasing the spread 50%. I can also change the color by double clicking on the stop and choosing a color here. So if I choose a color, that color stop now changes to the color I specified. Okay, so very simple to work with and altering. Once again, we can change the spread here in the panel. The spread is basically the circular area around the color stop. In this gradient panel, I can select a type or value here in the spread. I can also change the opacity. A couple other locations that I can change this in my properties panel. We have some options here as well. Let's expand this. Let's go on and apply now a line mode freeform gradient. So again, I'm going to go to lines here. And in this case, what's interesting is Illustrator will keep the points color stops and apply the lines in addition to what's currently there. So with the line mode selected, I can click anywhere in the object to create the first color stop, but notice when I drag away from that stop, a line segment appears. So this is the starting point now for my line segment. So again, clicking, I create a second color stop on my line segment. And I can alter this. It can be curved. I can do all kinds of really interesting effects here. To delete, I can drag them outside of the object area, or I can click delete gradient stop in my panel over here. All right, so if we finish this off here, now if I go back to points, let's get rid of some of these points so we can see how this linear freeform gradient will look. Let's delete everything here, and the reason why I see all white is because all my color stops are white. Same as the point method, I can double click to change my color. And of course I can go into different color mixing models here, so I don't have to stay within my just default swatches. I can adjust the color in this method as well. Okay, so there you can see the effect of a little bit more realism with that. Let's deselect and go out, and you can see how this looks. So the point and line modes within the freeform gradient really do act similar, the difference being that the line draws segments between, and that affects the way that that color blending is occurring, where the points are specific color stops. So the freeform gradient option in Adobe Illustrator.